How far can a father go to stop his son from marrying the wrong girl? Welcome to Brian and Brenda's story.
Brian was born into a world of wealth and influence. His father, Oscar, was a man feared and respected in equal measure. He owned the largest chain of retail shops and expansive farms that stretched for miles around the town. In every corner of the region, the name Oscar commanded attention, a man who had built an empire from sweat, ruthlessness, and shrewd decisions. Brian, his only son, was expected to follow in his footsteps. The family mansion sat on a hill, with golden gates and manicured lawns that looked more like royal gardens than a home. Servants moved silently through the hallways, and luxury was woven into the fabric of every room. Brian had been raised in comfort, private tutors, expensive clothes, luxury vacations, and the privilege of choice. But Brian was restless. From a young age, he felt disconnected from the life handed to him. The polished world his parents worshipped felt shallow. He found no joy in designer watches or silk-lined suits. What he longed for was something real, something that felt true. His heart yearned for authenticity, for human connection, for a life not built on image, but on soul. One day, on a drive to one of the family's rural properties, Brian asked his driver to stop by a small village market. He stepped out of the sleek black car and walked into the chaos of life, muddy roads, shouting vendors, and the smell of fresh vegetables mixed with dust and smoke. It was nothing like his world, and yet it felt alive. That's where he first saw her. Brenda stood by a wooden stool. Her dress was worn but clean, and her feet were dusty from hours of standing. She noticed him staring and raised an eyebrow, curious. "You lost, city boy?" she asked, without a smile. Brian chuckled. "No, just looking. Well, this is not a zoo. If you're not buying, move along." That response made him smile. She was different, unimpressed by his clothes, his car, or his air of confidence. He bought some vegetables just to keep the conversation going. The next day, he came back, and the day after, and the day after that. In the weeks that followed, Brian and Brenda built a bond neither expected. Brenda, who had never gone beyond the village, found herself drawn to Brian's curiosity and gentleness. And Brian, the rich man's son, found something rare in Brenda: truth, warmth, and a kind of love that felt like home. They would meet in secret, away from the eyes of gossipers and guards. In the quiet of twilight, near the river, they would sit and talk about dreams. Hers to one day own a shop, his to escape the shadow of his father. They knew their love was forbidden. Brian's family would never allow him to be with a village girl who sold vegetables and never went to school. But love doesn't ask for permission. One evening, under the stars, Brenda confessed she was pregnant. Brian froze. He wasn't angry. He was scared. He knew what this meant. He would have to face his parents, Oscar, and his mother, Miriam, who had already begun searching for a wealthy bride for him. He promised Brenda that he would come back, that he would fight for their love. He didn't lie. He meant it. But fate had other plans. Brian stood outside at the door. Oscar was reading financial reports while Miriam sat on the couch, scrolling through wedding catalogs with pictures of wealthy heiresses. He knocked once. "Enter," Oscar said. Brian stepped in fear. "I need to speak with you. Both of you." Oscar looked up. "What is it, Brian?" "You look pale," her mother asked. "I have something to tell you," Brian began. His throat tightened. "I met someone. Her name is Brenda." Oscar's eyebrow rose. "Brenda who?" "She's from the village. She sells vegetables in the market." Silence filled the room. Miriam set her tablet down. "A vegetable seller? Are you saying you've been sneaking around with a market girl?" his father asked. Brian nodded. "I love her. And she's pregnant." Miriam drew a sharp breath. Oscar stood, furious. "You fool," he growled. "You dare disgrace this family like this? Do you know what you've done? She's carrying my child. She's carrying a mistake." Miriam barked. "We had plans for you. The O&O family was ready to merge their business with ours through marriage, and now you throw it away for a village girl?" Brian's voice cracked. "She's not just a village girl. She's brave, kind, strong. She's nothing." Oscar roared. "If you bring her here, I will disown you." Brian's heart shattered. "So you want me to abandon her?" I want you to forget her, Miriam said. We will send her money, quietly. The child will never bear our name. I won't do that. Oscar stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Then leave. And just like that, Brian was thrown out of the house. No suitcase, no car, just silence and shame. He tried to return to the village that night, but he was stopped by Oscar's men. His father had eyes everywhere, and soon, threats followed. If he went near Brenda again, he would make her disappear. So Brian ran. He told himself it was for her safety, that Oscar's wrath would destroy Brenda and the unborn child if he didn't leave. He believed he had no choice. He fled the country under the cover of darkness, sent to study abroad by Oscar to recover from his disgrace, the official story said. Brenda waited. Days turned to weeks, then months. No messages, no visits, just silence. The whispers in the village turned cruel. Brenda became a black sheep, a girl who dared to dream beyond her status and got burned. She stopped going to the market as her belly grew heavier. She gave birth alone, in a small hut behind her brother Bosco's house. When the baby girl finally came, Brenda held her close, tears soaking her cheeks. "Neo," she whispered, "you are my purpose, my reason to keep going." But life did not grow kinder. Food was scarce, gossip was endless. She worked the fields during the day and nursed Neo at night. Some evenings, she had nothing to eat, and yet, she kept going, for Neo. As a brother, Bosco helped as much as he could, but he had a family of his own in the city slums. A wife, Grace, and 2 small children. His house was already stretched to the edge of poverty. One night, Brenda made a painful decision. "Bosco," she said, eyes red from crying. Take Neo to the city." "What?" he asked. "I can't raise her here. Not like this. Not when she deserves better." Bosco resisted, but Brenda begged. She packed a small bag and whispered, "I'll come back for you. I promise." That night, Bosco walked away with Neo in his arms. Brenda watched from the shadows as they disappeared into the darkness with tears in his eyes. She had no idea how much more fate had in store for them all. Bosco arrived to the city at dawn, the crowded bus station, carrying Neo wrapped in a faded shawl. She was peaceful, unaware of the weight now resting on Bosco's shoulders. Grace was waiting by the roadside when he arrived home. "What is this, Bosco?" she asked, voice sharp. Bosco looked tired. "Brenda's daughter. She has no one else." Grace crossed her arms. "And what about us? We barely feed our own children, and now you bring another mouth to feed?" "She's family," Bosco said simply. Grace said nothing for a while. Eventually, she helped him settle the baby, but from that day on, their already tense home became more strained. Grace tried to care for Neo, but the pressure of raising 3 children under one tiny roof broke something in her. The little food they had was stretched thinner. Bosco worked long hours as a security guard, but the salary barely kept them afloat. Arguments became daily. Grace wanted him to send Neo back to the village. Bosco refused, but then, tragedy struck. Bosco lost his job after the company he worked for shut down. With no money coming in, no relatives in the city, and nowhere to turn, the walls began to close in. The children cried from hunger. Grace fell sick with worry, and Bosco gave in. One afternoon, he walked to a nearby orphanage run by a Catholic mission. He entered the gate holding Neo tightly in his arms. A kind-faced nun, Sister Magdalene, welcomed him. "Can I help you?" He hesitated. "I need someone to take care of her, just for a while." The nun saw the pain in his eyes. "You don't have to explain. We'll take care of her. She was just over a year old." "I'm sorry," Bosco whispered. He left the orphanage with his heart crushed, guilt chasing him through every street. 2 weeks later, Bosco fell gravely ill. The fever took hold quickly. With no money for proper treatment, he died quietly in a city hospital bed, far from home. Grace, now widowed, packed what little she had and returned to the village with her 2 children. She didn't visit the orphanage. She left Neo behind. Back in the village, Brenda had been forced into a marriage by her relatives, as the only way for her to escape the shame they said. The man was older, from a distant town. She lived like a shadow of herself in a strange village, watching the road every day, waiting for letters from Bosco. But they never came. When word of Bosco's death finally reached her, months later, Brenda collapsed. Her brother, the only one who had stood by her, was gone, and with him, her daughter. She searched for answers. She wrote to churches, hospitals, even traveled back to the city once with the little money she had. But Neo had disappeared into the system, a nameless child among many. Years passed. Brenda returned to her lonely home, the spark in her eyes extinguished. She tried to rebuild her life with her new husband, but her heart was never fully present. She worked in silence, cooked in silence, and cried in silence. Somewhere in that same city, Neo grew up behind the high gates of the orphanage. She knew nothing of her past. The nuns never spoke of where the children came from, only that they were special and chosen by God. But Neo often lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why her mother didn't want her, why her father never came, why she always felt unwanted. She made a few friends. She became quiet, observant, strong, the kind of child who grew up too quickly. Neo was now 15. The orphanage was the only home she had ever known. She had learned not to expect much from life. She excelled in school, not because she had dreams, but because it gave her structure, control, a way to forget. Then, one cloudy afternoon, a visitor arrived. Her name was Grace. The nun at the reception desk called Neo's name. "You have a visitor." Neo blinked. She never had visitors. In the small meeting room sat a woman in her 40s, her face worn from years of hardship. When Neo walked in, their eyes met, and Grace's breath caught in her throat. She saw Bosco in the girl's face. Neo sat down slowly. "Who are you?" "My name is Grace," she replied, voice trembling. "I used to be married to your uncle. His name was Bosco." The name hit Neo like a wave. She had never heard it before, yet it stirred something in her. "I don't have a family," Neo said cautiously. "You do," Grace whispered. "You have a mother. Her name is Brenda. And she's alive." Neo stared, stunned. "That's not possible." The nun said, "They didn't know." Grace interrupted gently. "Your mother gave you to Bosco because she couldn't care for you. It was supposed to be temporary, but life got cruel. Bosco died. I left the city, and you were left here." The silence between them was thick with disbelief. "Why are you telling me this now?" Neo asked. "Because you deserve to know. I should have come sooner. I should have looked for you. I'm sorry." Neo's voice was barely a whisper. "Where is she now?" "She lives in she's married. She doesn't know I found you. But if you want to meet her, I'll take you." Days later, she packed the few belongings she had and left the orphanage with Grace. The bus ride to the village was long and bumpy. Grace tried to make small talk, but Neo barely spoke. Her mind was tangled with questions. What would her mother look like? Would she cry? Would she explain why she gave her up? Would she love her? When they arrived, the village felt like a dream in mud houses and the smell of cooking fires. They found an old woman who told them that Brenda remarried far away to another village. The old woman offered someone to take them to Brenda's home, and soon they arrived. The woman led them down a narrow path to a house with a tin roof. There, a woman stood washing clothes in a basin. She turned slowly. Brenda froze. Her hands dropped the cloth. The breath left her body. She stared at the girl standing beside Grace, the girl with her nose, her lips, her eyes. "Neo," she whispered. But instead of joy, fear flashed across her face. Neo stepped forward, with a shaky voice. "Are you my mother?" Brenda's eyes welled with tears. She nodded, yes, and then silence. Neo expected a hug, or maybe even an apology. But instead, Brenda stepped back. "I didn't know how to find you," she said in tears. "I thought you were gone. You left me," Neo said, with a hard voice. "I was trying to protect you." "Were you protecting me, or yourself?" Brenda collapsed onto a stool, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't know what else to do. I was so young, so afraid. I thought I was doing the right thing." Neo's heart raced. "Then why push me away now?" Brenda couldn't answer. Grace placed a hand on Neo's shoulder. "Give her time." But Neo had waited her whole life. She turned and walked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. That night, Brenda sat alone under the stars. Her husband didn't understand what had happened. She said little, but inside, she was unraveling. She had prayed for this moment for years, and when it came, she was too ashamed to embrace it. And Neo? She lay in a borrowed room, staring at the ceiling. Her mind burned with a new, deeper ache. She wasn't an orphan. She was abandoned. Brian sat in his office, staring out at the city skyline. The towering buildings and endless traffic below meant nothing to him. Years ago, he had everything: money, success, the admiration of his peers. But there was one thing he had never been able to find again: peace. He had tried to forget Brenda, tried to bury the memory of her eyes, her voice, the way she laughed under the mango tree where they used to meet. But some memories don't fade. Some become louder with time. The final blow came after years of marriage to a wealthy woman named Selena, whom his parents proposed for him. She was beautiful, refined, from a family Oscar had approved of. But their marriage had been cold from the start, strategic, not romantic. After a decade of trying, they received a devastating truth: Brian was infertile. He sat in the doctor's office, staring at the report in disbelief. "We've run multiple tests," the doctor said gently. "I'm afraid you won't be able to father a child naturally." Brian felt the ground disappear under him. Suddenly, the echoes of his past came rushing back. Brenda. She had told him she was pregnant. He had assumed, at the time, that it was just a way to hold on to him. That maybe she had made it up, or maybe the child hadn't survived. He never checked, never asked. Now, for the first time in years, he wondered, what if she had told the truth? So he hired a private investigator without telling anyone, not even Selena. He gave them the little information he remembered: Brenda's full name, the village she lived in back then, her brother's name, Bosco. Weeks passed, and months. Then, one evening, a call came. "Sir," the investigator said, "we found her." Brian drove for hours the next day, his mind in turmoil. He didn't know what he would say. What if she refused to see him? What if the child wasn't his? What if he had missed out on a daughter all these years? When he arrived in the village, people stared at the sleek black car. He stepped out in a suit, completely out of place among the simple homes. He followed the investigator's directions to a small house at the end of a dusty lane. He knocked. Brenda opened the door, and time froze. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked older, thinner, but still beautiful in a quiet, weathered way. "Brenda," Brian called out. "What are you doing here?" she asked, with a shaky voice. "I came. I needed to know. About the child. Was it true?" Brenda stepped out, closing the door behind her. She crossed her arms, fighting back the years of hurt. "You want the truth now? After disappearing for more than a decade?" "I didn't know how to come back. My father." "I waited." "Brian," she interrupted. "I waited and waited, thinking you'd come for us. But you didn't. You left me to face everything alone." He looked down. "I was scared. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you." She laughed bitterly. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself." He nodded, accepting the truth. "I was a coward. I won't deny it. But now I know I can't have children. And suddenly I remember. You said you were pregnant." "I was." "Where is the child?" Brenda didn't answer. The door creaked open slowly behind her. A figure stood in the doorway. Brian turned and saw her. A teenage girl, with eyes that mirrored his own. She looked back at him with confusion, then recognition, then something else: anger. "Neo," Brenda whispered. Neo stepped forward. "You're my father?" Brian felt everything collapse in that moment. He nodded slowly. "Yes." Neo's eyes welled up. "Where were you all my life? Do you know how many nights I cried wondering if I was worth anything? Wondering why no one wanted me?" "I didn't know," Brian said, with a cracky voice. "I swear, I didn't know you existed. But you knew she was pregnant." Neo snapped. "You knew, and you left, and now you show up. What, because you can't have another child?" Brian swallowed hard. "Yes, and no. I'm here because I can't live with the regret anymore. I missed everything. Your first steps, your first words. I missed being your father." "You still did," Neo said coldly. Brenda tried to speak, but her voice caught. Brian stepped forward slightly. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope maybe we can start again. I want to know you, even if it's just a little. Neo looked at him, with storm of emotion on her face. She turned to Brenda. I knew. You could have told me, but you didn't. I was afraid, Brenda whispered. Afraid you'd hate me. I do, Neo said quietly, but I still want to understand. And with that, she turned and walked away again. Brian and Brenda stood together, heart aching. They had both made mistakes. Now they could only hope there was still time to make them right. Brenda couldn't sleep. She watched the sun rise each morning. Neo had returned to the house, but everything had changed. She no longer called Brenda Mama. She didn't ask questions, didn't laugh, didn't cry. She was just there, a presence heavier than silence. Brian, meanwhile, stayed at a guest house nearby. Every day, he came by the house hoping to speak to Neo, to connect with her. Sometimes she'd listen. Most times she walked away. Brenda hated the way he looked at her, like he was a father now, like he could just pick up where he left off. One afternoon, Brenda confronted him outside her gate. You think you can just come here and be her father? She hissed. I don't think anything, Brian said calmly. I hope. That's all I have now. She's been through hell, Brenda said. You don't get to swoop in and play the hero. I know that. I'm not here to take her away from you, aren't you? Brenda crossed her arms. Because that's what it feels like. Brenda, I made a mistake, Brenda, the biggest one of my life. But I want to make it right. For her, not for me, not for you. They stood in silence. Inside the house, Neo overheard every word. Her heart beat faster. She didn't want them fighting, didn't want to choose. But it seemed like that's exactly what they were forcing her to do. Later that night, Brenda sat beside Neo, trying to explain. I was young, scared. When I gave you to Bosco, I thought it was the best thing. I never imagined he'd leave you at that orphanage. I never stopped thinking about you. I swear. Neo finally spoke. Then why didn't you look for me? I didn't know where to start. Neo nodded slowly. Do you love me? Brenda gasped, tears rising. With everything in me, Neo turned to her. Then let me decide what happens next. I need to figure things out. The next day, Neo went to see Brian alone. You left her, Neo said softly. You left me. I did. Do you love me? Brian blinked back tears. More than you'll ever know. Then stop trying so hard, Neo said. Just be here. Let me get to know you. He smiled, relieved, and so began a slow process of healing. Brian didn't try to take control. He brought her books, helped her with school applications, showed her pictures of her grandfather Oscar, and told her about the empire he once built. Neo listened, hesitant but curious. Brenda watched from the sidelines, a storm of pride and jealousy churning in her. Then came the problem no one expected. Both parents wanted time with her, more than what was fair to the other. Brian asked if she'd come live in the city with him. Brenda said she still needed her, that they were rebuilding something precious. Neo, once again, was stuck in the middle. I can't be in two places at once, she finally said. You both want me to choose, but I'm not a prize to be won. Her words cut deep. Brian lowered his head. Brenda looked away. I want to stay in school. I want to grow. I want to be myself, Neo said firmly. So here's what we'll do. She proposed a plan. She would spend weekdays with her mother in the village, and weekends in the city with Brian. She didn't want to pick sides. She wanted a family, even if it was broken and stitched together with pain. Reluctantly, both parents agreed, and so began a new chapter, flawed, awkward, but real. Months passed. Seasons changed. The wound between Neo, Brenda, and Brian didn't fully heal, but it scarred over. And in those scars, something unexpected began to grow, understanding. Neo balanced her life between two homes. On weekdays, she lived with Brenda in the village. They woke up early together, made breakfast, shared chores, and sometimes laughed about small things. On weekends, she traveled to the city with Brian. His world was polished, gleaming offices, fine restaurants, shopping malls. At first, it overwhelmed her, but she began to find comfort in his quiet gestures, how he remembered what snacks she liked. Still, the conflict between her parents lingered. Brenda couldn't shake the fear of losing her daughter again. Brian, on the other hand, was trying to make up for lost time, often stepping into fatherhood too quickly.
They clashed more than once. Each time, Neo found herself caught in the crossfire. One evening she sat them both down. "I love you," Brenda said, "and I just want you close." "I love you too," Brian added, "and I want to be the father I never was." "I want both of you," Neo said, "but not like this. You need to stop fighting over me and start fighting for me." Together, that night marked a turning point. The next weekend, Brian invited Brenda to visit the city with Neo. They went to the zoo. It was awkward at first, but Neo watched them slowly let their guards down. Brenda even laughed, really laughed, when a monkey snatched a soda bottle from Brian's hands. They weren't a couple. They would never be. But they were two people bound forever by love and mistakes and a child who needed them. Later that evening, they sat on a balcony overlooking the city lights. Brian spoke first. "I was angry at myself for years. I wanted a family so badly, but I didn't realize I already had one. I just walked away from it." Brenda nodded. "And I held on to that pain for too long. I think I punished Neo for what you did. I didn't mean to, but I did. I don't care about the past anymore," Neo said. "I just want a future where I'm not afraid of being left behind." Brian reached over and held her hand. Brenda did the same. And for the first time in Neo's life, she didn't feel like she was in between. She felt like she belonged. The days turned into weeks, then into a year. Neo joined a good school in the city but returned to the village during holidays. Brenda started a small business with Brian's help, selling homemade beauty oils. Brian introduced Neo to his extended family, and while not everyone approved, Neo held her head high. As the roots took hold, so did their bond. It wasn't perfect. They still argued, still stumbled, but they had each other. In the end, they didn't become a perfect family, but they were a family.
We have come to the end of our story. Check out another story we've prepared for you on the screen. And if you've enjoyed this story, give it a like and subscribe for more.